Let's go through Wilbur Smith a little bit. In his book, The New Science was published, it was unfinished at his death. You can get copies of this off the internet, download it off the internet, The New Science, Rex Research. You can download your own. I printed it out because I don't like reading on screen. He said there's actually 12 parameter dimensions, and they go up from one to the other in a sort of quadrature system, mechanism. That is like a sideways step to a higher order. The 12 I've said, they're grouped in four groups of three. The first three is called the space fabric. The second three, the field fabric. Those three, the control fabric, and these, the precipitation fabric. Precipitation, strange word, meaning what is in total perception, the reality that's in total perception. Now, what makes me so convinced about he did actually have a contact with a UFO, with extraterrestrial entities, intelligence that tried to guide him, was that through these two psychic ladies, they described some hardware, some pieces of equipment, some technical stuff. Now the psychic ladies didn't understand this, they just said what they got, and then it came to giving some drawings, and they just drew what they felt inspired to draw. They had not a clue what it was. So that makes when somebody is speaking something and they don't personally understand it, it makes it more credible. But he, as a chief radio engineer, he did have understanding, and because he was the chief or the boss, he had the facilities to go and make this stuff in the workshop, which he did. One of these pieces of equipment was a special coil wound in a very peculiar manner, like a caduceus. That is a copy. It's wound on a ferrite core. The ferrite core must be hollow. That's another important factor. And then you put radio frequencies through this. At certain particular frequencies, you get some very weird phenomena. You can put a kilowatt of energy into it and nothing comes out. No radio wave, no heat. The energy is going somewhere. And he described that as producing tensor energy. Tensor is like is a technical word meaning a parameter that's got several orders. You've got scalar, vector, and then scalar, vector, tensor to a certain order, to a second order, third order, fourth order. Right. These 12 groups I've just mentioned, they start from the creator, the source of the universe. I have to say this, I'm not using the word God, because God has got a limited understanding to some people. We're talking about the source of everything, every rock, every planet, every star, every galaxy in the whole universe, everything, every life form, everything. Not some personal God to one particular people as one particular stage in history in one particular planet. No, for the whole lot, the source of everything. This enormity of mind, imagining something, imagining the thought process, starting from nothing and going up and up and up and up. And then when you get to there, you've got a creation. If you were to go to another one, to go to a 13th one, it wouldn't happen, because that would just be a sideways step. A sideways step is the same as a length. So from there, it goes back and starts again. There's only 12. I just point out what he said. He said distance, area, volume. When we think of 3 dimensions, like on a box or something, we think of length, width and height. But the other way to think of the same 3 dimensions is distance, area, volume. We can go up that way. The 4th one, he said, the 4th out of 12, was density. He said, he describes in more depth, he says it's density of reality, or more particularly, change of. Well, this is coming back to the beginning where that pencil drawing I mentioned about the water going in and the water going out, that analogy of the water tank, pencil drawing. Think of it this way. And he said time is actually, it's a little bit like the inverse of chaos. If we think, explaining that again in a different way, if we think of familiar speed, distance over time, miles per hour, kilometers per hour, meters per second. You notice time there is on the denominator. So reality density would be change over time. So the change is like that water tank. Order coming out of chaos going in, and chaos out of order going out. Chaos going out, order coming in, chaos going out. It's a tank. The time effect that we know, that we are familiar with, is the denominator. So it's like a derivative of the change, an inverse derivative of the change. Time that we are familiar with is also subjective to us. If we could see the universe from the outside, it would make a lot of sense. But as with this water pipe, if you're just focusing on one little end and you can't see the rest of it, or you won't focus on the other little end, it's difficult. You've got to raise your thinking to imagine what the whole lot looks like. And that's the understanding. So, we have to try in some way to put things together and then raise our consciousness, which is why I mentioned so much about the levels of consciousness. We've got to raise our consciousness to try and put this stuff together. What it is from an objective sense rather than a subjective. Right. Here's a little video. It's an orchid bud. It's a time-lapse photograph, film. I think it's shot over about 14 hours. You could see, if we were on one petal observing another, if we were sat there observing another, we would just see movement. Like we're sat on this planet and we observe the sun and the stars moving in the sky. Well, we're turning as part of the thing. But then time, we can just divide it up, that movement, and divide a rotation of the earth, and we divide it into 24 and divide 24 into 60 minutes and 60 minutes into 60 seconds and so on. That is dividing up, but that is our subjective impression of time. If we could see from the outside, like we're watching an orchid there, it would be different. Time is the effect observed by us in the universe. It's not necessarily the actual thing. That is what I'm presenting. Right, come to Rudolf Steiner now. When he talked about there's an opposite in his meditations and astral travel, and the things he did, very advanced mind, very advanced person. He described as another sort of space. It's complete inverse, the opposite of our own space. Well, he had an assistant at that time called George Adams, he translated the word because George Adams was fluent in German and fluent in English. He was educated at Cambridge University, and afterwards he tried to work out a mathematical model of what Steiner had said. And he did it, and he came into a branch of mathematics called projective geometry. from the physical dimensions of space to 3 inverse dimensions. And this was used projective geometry to translate one to the other. There is actually an example of projective geometry we're all familiar with. Computer images, where computer graphics, the 3D images generated by computers. Well, the mathematics that behind the program of that computer work is projective geometry. But it's heavy maths. Another person got hold of that, Nick Thomas. And he started putting this from an abstract mathematical sense, he started putting this to the eco-technology like Victor Schauberg sort of stuff, flow of water and interesting things like that. He putting these two things together. So you get an idea, it flows from one person to another person, and it was Nick Thomas's books that I read. Schuyler, let's talk a little bit about Schuyler. 3D time with orthodox science. Well, I want to mention him, but so go to that, jump to that slide. In this book he describes this time is like time planes, in this other sense, this other invisible existence, but it's there, but it's invisible. We're not able to see it, we can't see it, but it's there. He says it's 3-dimensional and it consists of planes, and the time we experience goes straight from one to another, straight line, down the centre, straight line. But time is actually spirals round. These planes, he said, are moving in a sort of an orbital movement. An orbital movement. So the whole plane might go to the whole universe, and the whole universe, doesn't matter how big that is, it goes in the same orbital fashion, these time planes, spiraling. And so it's theoretically possible to go different paths to get to the same result. He described parts of an atom as being partly in the past and partly in the future. And these planes can be locally distorted. Around an atom, they're locally distorted. It's a heavy book, but certainly profound. I don't know whether I agree with all of it, but it's one of my best books, even if I don't agree with all of it. Oh, by the way, that little diagram was created using my CAD program, my computer-aided design, which I use for my engineering stuff, projective geometry. Okay. Dewey Larson. He first published his work in 1959 in the preliminary state, and then published it again, rewritten and extended in 3 volumes. This is volume 1 of them. I've got all 3. He goes completely away from orthodox science, and he says there's only 3 in physical existence, there's only 3 dimensions of motion. And he decides motion is space over time or time over space. And he uses the analogy of a box. He says the box can have an inside and an outside. It always has an inside, it always has an outside. You only got the box. You can't have a box with an outside or a box with an inside. You've always got both. That is the intrinsic, always connected nature of space and time. It cannot be separated. You cannot have time on its own. You cannot have space on its own. So this puts the thought, these are connected. You can't have anything physical without space and time being connected in 3 dimensions. He explains he goes through all properties of materials, electrical stuff, magnetism, all sorts of gravity. He explains it all out of these 2 principles. 3 well, you can read them yourself. Space over time and time over space. there's two ways up you can write this, and it produces two sectors, which you call the material sector or the cosmic sector. Both exist, both are always present in matter, but we are attached to one. We, as physical beings, we're attached to the top way around. We think of space over time. But there is another opposite sort of universe, which is the other way around. Now this is slightly different to what Steiner said. Steiner was talking about another sort of space. There's a distinction here. So we mustn't muddle these two things. We're talking slightly different things here. He's talking the way up, and Steiner was talking the other two sorts of space. Now there's two sorts of space. Could it be that other forms of life, we psychics, we're definitely aware that there is another form of life, but we're not sure what it is. People talk about fairies or leprechauns or jinn. There is another form of life, but it's not physical, which again orthodox science just laughs at. Could it be that they are attached to the other he's describing there? Well, that's a person thought. But then I notice in the Quran it does say humans are built out of clay, where the jinn are built out of smokeless fire. Well, to me, smokeless fire sounds like a non-technical way of describing energy. Now, interestingly, that's the other way up. But if we put in Larson's books, if you put time over space, we would observe it as energy. We would observe that as energy, and we'd observe that as motion. So maybe there's connections here. Sort of a tentatively going with this, it might have connections. Oh, Victor Schauberger also talked about implosion and explosion, which again might fit with what we've got here. So things, they're different insights are different, but maybe there's some sort of connection. Photo of a galaxy. I think it's taken from the Hubble telescope. I ask you, the physical constants that we have in a laboratory, are they the same in the centre as they are on the outside? I would think that is very presumptive to assume that they are. From the centre, I would think it's very presumptive to assume that they're the same. Field density. What do I mean by field? We're talking like electromagnetic fields, two simple bar magnets. I can feel there's something between. I cannot see it, but there's a magnetic field. Fields do exist. We can also know that fields can swirl, they can turn. We can have an electrical field, we can have a magnetic field. What other sorts of fields can we have? Fields can vary. So are the physical constants in the centre the same as they are on the outside? What happens if time is different? It's not necessarily the same. If orthodox science assumes that there is a framework of space and time, but no, we're talking the opposite way around. We're talking the universe exists and space and time are created, and it could be a field, or part of it is a field. This is a short video of a whirlpool, water. You notice in the centre the water is revolving faster than it is on the outside. On the outside the water's going around slower, and on the centre it's going around faster. That is different to something that is like a book or a disc which everything turns together. If everything turns together, hold it there, is quite different sort of rotation to the centre going faster. Wilbur Smith, the UFO, Canadian UFO guy, he said when he talked about spin being the basic reality of the universe is spin, he was talking about spin in this sense, where the centre is going faster. Okay. Okay, you another short video. Sorry it's so small, but that's what I could get on the internet. You're all familiar with what it is. Like the last slide, the people on the centre, if they all walked at the same speed, which rather than trying to spend time at a certain spot, they would get around a lot quicker than the people on the outside. The people, they've got a lot further to walk. So if they're walking at the same speed, those on the centre are going faster. It's rotating. Now I just thought that was quite interesting compared to the last slide, and the fact that we've got a cube in the centre when all this stuff is... I just thought that was strangely curious. I say no more than curious. Okay. So, summing up, not a static system, but a continuous flow system. Like money in the economy, to work it must keep going round. If money stops flowing, it all falls to pieces. One person's spending is another person's wages. That's the only value of money. A creating universe, creating, not created, past tense. Okay, let's build this up now. Starting from a universal consciousness with nothing else existing, out of nothing at all, two opposites can be imagined, outwards and inwards. This is a motion which Larson described as scalar. He described a balloon with dots on it. I'll bring that closer to the camera. Now if I let that down, you can see the movement, see those dots? Look at the movement of the dots. That motion is not a vector motion. They're moving either inwards in a scalar fashion or outwards in a scalar fashion. You can have a motion. Well, this sort of outwards and inwards is scalar. An example might be radiation going out, gravity coming in. A thought construct of the creator. But there's two types of inward and outward. From the unmanifest source to manifest. But the very fact of manifesting means we have space and we have the opposite of space. As sort of picking up a little bit on the esoteric subplanes, planes and subplanes, it's also picking up on the difference between Rudolf Steiner work and Dewey Larson work. We could use different words for the same thing. Order going to chaos, or chaos going to order, and inward space and outward space. The connection between the two is motion. Oh, it's a wonderful slide, but it's ambiguous. Why is it ambiguous? Because I've mentioned outward space as an arrow, but space three-dimensional. So how, if this space is three-dimensional, in space I'm representing three-dimensionals, such as a cardboard box. How do I depict inward space? There's no dimensions left. I've used them all. There's 3 dimensions and I've used 3 up. There's nothing to... How can any artwork or anything physical represent it? So we can't have any physical, see anything physical. We cannot imagine it. Even in our meditation we cannot imagine it. But it's there. Which is what I've said there. How can we possibly visualize what we have never seen? But there is a way. Same as the pipe. If you're looking at one end of the pipe, looking at the other end of the pipe, notice its function. You can conceive in your mind what it is. Abstract mathematics, we can do a lot with abstract mathematics. We can count numbers, like this, 1, 2, 3, 4 going up, minus 1, 2, 3, minus 4 that way. Or we can use a different datum. We can use a datum of 1. 1, 2, 3, 4, datum of 1, half, third, quarter. That's sort of based on this sort of relationship. In biology, male mates with female equals unity. It produces a child. But the principle is in many sort of philosophical ideas come together. Two inputs come together, or a design process. Abstract thought, creative thought and rational thought coming together. It produces a unity. How do you describe that in mathematics? Is it multiplying it? Or adding? Imaginary numbers. We can run away with our abstract thoughts and our abstract mathematics. It can lead us in wrong directions. Be careful. Okay, that is a very cluttered slide. But I've put it all there. Divine thinking, outwards and inwards. Wilbur Smith, the Canadian UFO guy. The first 6 of his 12. Schuyler, from his book on time. When he gets to the third one, he said the next one after that, going up, is I, the imaginary number, times volume. Do it again, I squared times the volume. I squared, if you do square it, there's actually got to be 2 of them because you produced a plane. So you've got 2 lots of I squared. Again, 6. You've come to 6 planes. These are 6. Oh, get out of that. You 6 planes there. 3D space and 3D counter space, like from the work that came out of Rudolf Steiner. Let's put another input to that. A gear wheel. If we represent a gear wheel as turning, because I said it's an unfolding universe. So there's movement to the universe. It's unfolding. In an abstract sense, we're thinking it's unfolding, space unfolding. But if we put another sort of opposite of space, and that's unfolding as well. If we put the 2 together, the space and the other spot of space, where they mesh. Let's bring that closer to the camera. Where they mesh, that mesh is atoms in time. That is what I'm saying. Where they mesh, the 2 sorts of things, 2 sorts of motion, where they mesh, atoms in time. Now, all that last slide, all these are abstract thoughts. Abstract mathematics, abstract insights, they're all difficult. But to put them together, the only way we can do it is to raise our thinking higher, to the concrete spiritual. This is above philosophy. It's above the abstract thought that universities are strong at. It is higher. We have to momentarily touch it. We have to reach to that level, and then it all fits into place. But we know the consequences of getting this wrong. If this is put wrong and something down here blocks it, we could actually block it at a higher level, or even block it there. If we stop the source, the God, the Creator, if we stop this from reaching us, from guiding us, from being our inspirer, from evolving our consciousness, well, disaster happens. We have there's so much to keep it open. We always have that sense of awe that this is the Creator's universe we are just discovering. So, putting that into words, spiritual morality before abstract concepts. So important. Concepts before concrete mathematical representation. Must be in the right order. Don't let our mathematics drive us, which many in alternative science do. Implications. We're nearly at the end now. Have I just spoiled this talk by talking about science fiction, vast new energy sources, transmutation of elements, anti-gravity propulsion, communication beyond our locale? Well, these things I've just said are based on actual happenings. Okay? And what have I done with all this investigation? It's a basis for design engineering, which I can get back now to what I wanted to do at the start, designing my alternative engineering in this esoteric engineering for a good purpose for the free world. It's also a tangible starting point for academia, where there's so much in orthodox science that is true and correct, but there's some amendments are needed. It's a starting point. We must put the horse before the cart. Get it right way around. Horse at the front. That's my website. You'll find more information, references, and there's contact information. Salam alaikum.
I see you let the silver go down and Scaramouche, we need to defend them. Don't they got the lightning, very, very frightening. Galileo, 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 I'm just a poor boy, nobody loves me. He's just a poor boy from a poor family.